opportunity to play like gods for next half of football. We can't be afraid to lose. There's no room for fear in this game.
This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show.
What in the wide world of sports is going on here? You can't stand the way this place is. Take yourself to higher places.
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
Not only doing the game on the other yard. You blitz all night! If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
And it's just disappointing that every time we go to the same game, it's blowout. We will not make that mistake again.
And Mark Thaler.
As far as I'm concerned, there's only one poll, and people can take shots at me if they want for that, but it's just imitations of sincerest feeling about it.
And I'll offer this up to you. Next time you have to make a trip out to Keene, if you want to come next Friday to see Bedford Keene, I'll buy you dinner.
Well, good morning and welcome to another edition of the New Hampshire High School Football Show. We do it each and every Saturday morning between 7 and 9 a.m. live on the radio. WGIR AM 610 in the Manchester area. Seacoast signal for you 96.7 The Wave. Pete Terrier along with Mark Thaler. Mark, good morning to you.
Good morning, Pete. I like the new open.
Yeah, you like that? Did Rupert buy you dinner last week? I mean, I know that they lost. So he probably wasn't feeling too good about it.
No, you know, he offered to do so before the game, and I said depending on how quickly I get the story done and a few other factors. Ultimately, I said no because it's probably not the right thing to do. Got to stay objective and not take dinner from the coach of one of the teams that I'm covering. So
you're seriously telling me that he saw you out there? What was his reaction when he saw you?
No, he didn't see me. This was hours before the game. I was emailing back and forth with him because he's a teacher at the high school. I needed a roster and just wanted to confirm a few other things with him. And when he obviously found out that I was going to be making the trip to the game, he said, "Hey, if you want to come, we'll do the dinner thing if you have time after the game." And I just said, "Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it, but we'll have to see how things go with what I need to get done for the newspaper." And then also, like I said, it's probably not the most objective thing to do to take dinner from the coach. So, but I do appreciate the offer nonetheless.
I'd have done it.
It's not that I didn't want to. I'm always up for free meals, certainly, but I figured I'd played a little down the middle there, I guess.
Well, a lot of games got wiped out last night due to the rain, and some of them probably should have. If you saw the highlights of that Spalding-Keene game on WGIR TV last night, Friday Night Football with Jamie Staten, what a quagmire that game was. Certainly affected play around the state, a game that both you and I were at. Didn't seem like weather was that much of a factor, but let's get the Friday night scoreboard. It's an abbreviated scoreboard. It'll take you about 2 seconds to get through the thing. It is brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and the Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults it's against the law to provide alcohol to minors, yes, even after you sit in a football game outside in the pouring rain for about 2 hours.
There were only 7 games last night, Pete, so like you said, abbreviated scoreboard starting in Division 1, the game we were both at last night at Stello Stadium. 10th ranked Nashua South beat unranked Nashua North 30-17 in that Gate City rivalry game. Quarterback Trevor Knight for South, he ran for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also passed for 109 yards and a touchdown. Dymere Hyde also chipped in with 115 rushing yards and a TD. The other Division 1 game last night, number 2 Exeter with a 28-0 win over number 7 Concord. Ethan Joyce, Tyler Grant, Jamie Vogt all had touchdowns in that win for the Blue Hawks. They bounced back nicely from last week's upset against Winnicott. In Division 2, out in Spalding, number 8 Keene with a 6-0 win over the Red Raiders. Lucas Lupa to Matt Delvecchio for a 22-yard touchdown. That was all the scoring in the game. It came as the first half expired, that touchdown did. Keene High School had 8 fumbles in that game, so that game was probably affected just a little bit by the weather, we'd say.
8 fumbles?
8 fumbles.
Jeez.
8 fumbles. Reminds me of Ron Offon from Winnicott has told me a number of times this year. He reminds me anyway that Winnicott had a game last year against Alvin, I believe, where he said they had like 10 fumbles in the game.
Yes, I remember that.
So that was the first thing I thought of when I saw 8 fumbles last night in the Keene Spalding game.
And the funny thing is, on both of those games, They probably won that game against
I think they did, yeah.
And Keene beat Spalding with all the fumbles.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to overcome that many fumbles. But the Blackbirds did it, and they bounced back and get into the win column. 3 games in Division 4. Trinity continues to roll 52-0 over Lebanon. Junior Austin Chambers had 4 touchdowns, 3 of them in the first half. Those were runs of 26, 15, and 19 yards. He also had a second half kick return touchdown, an 89-yarder. Romeo Masuko also chipped in, 2 touchdowns of 68 and 13 yards. Laconia gets into the win column finally. We're in the last week of September. The Sachems beat Kingswood 22-6, and Kennett knocked off Hanover 18-7. The only other game last night that was played, Division 6, Mascoma Valley 40, Raymond 6.
Yeah, and that means a lot of games going to be played today, and I don't know what it was. I got in here about 6:30 this morning, and if it was raining, it was like a light mist. And I'm just trying to check the forecast here. Bill Guile on Channel 9. I think it's going to be okay today. There might be some showers, but they will definitely get all these games in. They pretty much have to. I don't know where else they're going to move them. Yeah. So we'll run down the schedule. Division 1, big one in the Queen City, Central at Memorial. We'll talk to Coach Peter Colcord next hour about that game. And then another big Division 1 matchup, Londonderry at Pinkerton. Now that's big. Not in terms of how competitive the series has been lately, because as you pointed out in the Union Leader, it hasn't been competitive at all. Pinkerton's won 12 games in a row in that series, including a couple of playoff wins. But the MAC plaque is big. That whole weekend thing between Londonderry and Pinkerton. We'll talk with John Rich coming up in just a couple of minutes, the Lancers head coach. That game kicks off at 7 o'clock tonight. Huge one tonight in Nashua, Bedford at Girton. I assume you might be making the trek out to that game.
I should have just slept at Stella Stadium last night, yeah. I'll be back there. I will.
Well, that game is tonight at 7. I'm very much interested in that one. Winnicott takes on Dover this afternoon at 2. Merrimack plays West at 1 o'clock. Division 3 game that I was going to go to last night, but it got moved to today. Goffstown at Portsmouth. That's at 1 o'clock. You got Pembroke at Merrimack Valley kicking off at 3. Alvern at Milford at 6 tonight. And then you got Conval at Souhegan. They're going to play that one at 7 instead of when they were supposed to play last night. Division 4, big one. Wyndham at Plymouth, 1:30 game today. I know John Kester from NHSportsPage.com is going up there and he's going to film the highlights. Dave Haley will write about that game in NHSportsPage.com tomorrow. You can check that out. That one's a very interesting game. We'll talk about that as the course of this 2 hours rolls on. You got St. Thomas at John Stark at 7. Division 5, Stevens at Interlakes Moultonboro, 2:30 kickoff. Monadnock at Pelham at 6. Summersworth at Sanborn kicking off at 3. Kearsarge, Epping, Newmarket. That game starts at 2 o'clock. Division 6, you got Franklin at Campbell at 1:30. Guilford at Newfound at 2. Winnisquam and Farmington Mead at 1:30. Then you got Brady at Newport at 1:30. A couple of non-league games. Timberlane at Salem, 2 o'clock this afternoon. They play every single year. Then you got Hollis Brookline at Bow also at 2 o'clock. Those schedules, all courtesy of Mark Thaler and our friends at the New Hampshire Union Leader. They do a great job. You guys got to do a lot of jockeying. What's it like in the newsroom on a Friday afternoon when you're hearing all these cancellations coming in and you're trying to figure out when these games are going to be played? It must be pretty crazy.
It's a good question because I'm usually not there. I'm usually out, driving somewhere or getting ready to go to a game. But I do know that the folks on the sports desk, the sports editors, they work very hard to, especially on a day like yesterday where things get postponed, where things get postponed to another day, and it can be tough because we know that athletic directors at schools are busy doing their thing, and to have to try to contact them while they're busy running around, there's quite a bit of juggling that goes involved. So the folks on the desk, I take no credit for that. The folks on the desk do a very good job of tracking stuff down and making sure that we get as much, if not all of it, into the paper.
Well, you also have to go to Plan B as far as you mentioned juggling. Like I said, I was planning on going out to Portsmouth for Goffstown Souhegan. I found out in the afternoon that wasn't happening. Well, where am I going to go now? I don't know if you always planned on going north and south last night, but you got to move some people around.
Yeah, you do. I was assigned to north-south anyway. I was going to be there regardless, but I do believe that Roger Brown was going to be covering the Goffstown-Portsmouth game, and when that got postponed to today, opened up a chance to go cover Trinity, and a rare Friday night home game for the Pioneers, because that, of course, is central turf when they're playing at home on a Friday night. So, yeah, a lot of audibles are called when the rain messes things up, I guess we'd say.
Well, we'll find out wild if Rain messed things up with the MacPac festivities yesterday. I'm not sure that it did, but we'll see. A lot of events scheduled over the course of this entire weekend, and we'll talk with the head coach of the Londonderry Lancers football team in just a couple of minutes. John Rich will join us. We'll take a quick break. Just a reminder that you can watch the video cast of this show on the internet, nhsportspage.com. John Kesty comes in here, gets up early on Saturday mornings, films the whole thing. 3 weeks in a row, no shower, and you couldn't even tell unless I told you about it. Hey, I'm fresh. I wake up after, 5 hours of sleep after being up on a Friday night covering football, back in here ready to rock. We got Jen Wells producing the thing today. Mark Taylor, of course. I am Pete Terrier. Got a great show, as I said. John Rich coming up. We got Peter Coco from Memorial. Trying to find out what the heck is going on with that Memorial situation. NHIAA involved. Big investigation. Hearing about sanctions. This is like a crazy situation here. And we'll see what Coach Coco can tell us about that. He's coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show right here, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
If it is a Saturday morning during the New Hampshire high school football season between 7 and 9 a.m., you can hear it live on the radio, WGIR AM 610, in and around the Manchester area. That includes the town of Londonderry and also the town of Derry, where MacPlac Weekend is going on. It's the 30th annual MacPlac Weekend, and part of that, the big part of it, the signature part of it, is the football game between Pinkerton and Londonderry. Here to talk about that annual matchup is the head coach of the Londonderry Lancers. It's John Rich. John, good morning to you.
Oh, good morning to you. Thanks for having me.
Well, are you glad that the football game is tonight instead of last night during the pouring rain? It looks like the weather's going to be a little bit better this year, or tonight, I should say.
Tonight? Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but I'm sure Brian is glad that it's tonight. I probably would have played last night, but slows everything down a little bit, and it's a good equalizer, but regardless, we'll play whenever. So,
yeah, Coach, just a question about rain and how it impacts high school football games. It seems over the past few years that when it rains very heavy, teams scramble to postpone. And I'm just curious, from a coaching perspective, what's the reason that you get, if you've ever been involved in, obviously, in games where it's rained heavily? I mean, what's the reason for postponing to the next day or till it at least dries up a little bit?
To be honest, I think it depends on the team and kind of what your style of play is and what you do. Obviously, if you're a team that likes to throw the ball more, it's going to make it a little more difficult. If you're a team like, say, us or Exeter, where we're looking to establish the run, and if we don't have to throw the ball, we may not do so, and I think that benefits more of a team like us. So, it slows everybody down a little bit, so it can be a good equalizer if your opponent is a pretty quick team. It can even things up a little bit. So.
Is this
the team, I think?
I'm sorry. Is this a relatively new development then? Because it certainly seems like, even if you go back, maybe 10 years, I just threw that number up, but if you go back 10 years, certainly to the old school days of New Hampshire high school football, teams played in the rain, and it just seems like it's a recent development, somewhat anyway, that when it rains, most teams scramble.
Yeah, no, I wish I could answer that. I'm not sure, but
okay.
I know if the game was scheduled for last night, and as long as there's not a safety issue, we probably would have been playing if it was at our place, and maybe the same thing over at Pinkerton. I'm not sure. So.
John Rich from Londonderry is our guest. His team taking on Pinkerton tonight, 7 o'clock, really the cap on MacPlac Weekend. I was just hoping you could talk a little bit about what MacPlac Weekend is all about. I was watching Jamie Staten's show on WMUR last night, the Friday Night Football Show. They had a camera at your pep rally, which took place at Londonderry High School yesterday. Was a crazy scene. I mean, that was awesome. Yeah. Is this just, one of the highlights of going to school at Londonderry?
I think it is, especially for the athletic teams. The anticipation for us probably starts over the summer when we, us and Pinkerton and occasionally some other schools will get together for a wing T camp. So we get to kind of get our first look at each other, and it kind of builds as throughout the first 4 games there. So But it means a lot to the athletes. You know, everything Spirit Week's been going on at school here, and obviously our pep rally usually caps it off on Friday afternoon, and then we get to do the Friday Night Lights introduction last night. So it's special. It's important to the kids. So it's usually a lot of fun. They have all the games. The varsity games are held today, one day, one after the other. So the kids can come all day and watch everything take place. So it's a lot of fun.
John, you would think from watching the video clips last night on Channel 9 that it was a more for no disrespect intended, Coach, but a more balanced or rivalry, at least competitively the last few years. Pinkerton has rattled off 10 in a row in the MAC Plaque portion of the series, the regular season games, 12 in a row overall, counting those two playoff wins in 06 and 08. But you wouldn't know it from that video. I'm just curious: are the kids frustrated by the one-sided nature, at least recently in this rivalry?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I know there's been a lot of close games in football, and there's been a lot of close games in other sports as well. So I think the kids are aware of it, but I don't think it's frustrating to them at all. So I think every year it's kind of like a new chapter, if you will, and the kids want to sort of write their own chapter, and hopefully, the kids are talking about this year that they're gonna finally get one here after a decade. So hopefully that's the case. We'll see.
John Rich from Londonderry joins us talking about the game against Pinkerton, the MAC Plaque weekend, and the Lancers season so far. You guys are 500 right now, 2-2 overall. Was hoping you could talk a little bit about Portsmouth, that game in the beginning of the season. We're on a station on the Seacoast, 96.7 The Wave, and that's a team that they're the defending champs, obviously, in Division III. They've hung tough against Division I opponents. They took Central down to the wire last year. They beat you guys 22-10. What did you see from them compared to some of these other teams you play? You've played Salem, a Division I opponent. How do you compare a team like Portsmouth to a team like Salem in your own division?
Well, a couple things to begin with. I think, Portsmouth, in general, Portsmouth is probably a better football team, and, no disrespect intended to Salem, but the Portsmouth quarterback, he was a great athlete, could run and throw. They had a few skill guys, a few receivers that could, just were great athletes all around. So, and then to top it all off, I think they got two really good defensive tackles. I know one of them is getting looked at by some big schools. So, the combination of all three of those is, barring any injuries, of course, if they stay healthy, it should be a really good football team.
Coach, what happened defensively last week against Memorial? Jared Embody ran for almost 300 yards in that game, if I'm not mistaken, 293. Can you tell us from your side, from the Londonderry side, what was the difference there?
A lot of mistakes defensively. Kids not executing, what they were supposed to do, and that's my fault. And the coaching staff, we didn't get them prepared enough, and we looked at film, and the kids saw their mistakes and saw what they did, and saw how much it hurt the defense, and a bunch of big plays, and a lot of the same mistakes occurring over and over and over again, and sort of a point of emphasis this week, and as we move forward, and the kids know that they can correct those mistakes and get better. Hopefully, we can move forward and get a few more wins under our belt here, but. Too many mistakes, way too many mistakes, and the offense did a pretty good job at moving the football and scoring some points, and the defense didn't do their job last week.
Would you say, Coach, that those mistakes were they correctable mistakes in game, or was it something that you needed the film, after the fact to go over, review, and show the kids?
A little bit of both. Some were able to fix in game, and then there's some that the kids see it on film and realize the mistakes they're making, and easy fixes, things that certainly can be fixed and worked on through, for the remainder of the season, but things that have to be corrected. So.
Coach, Londonderry has been known for having star running backs. I mean, you go all the way back, and there's always seems to be another kid stepping up. Michael Ryan is a kid that's doing a good job for you this year. You have Dennis Bishop, who has had some big games running the football, and goes and plays with the band at halftime, which is pretty cool if you ask me. What is it about Londonderry and running backs? Is it the offense, the wing T like you have? A little bit different than what Tom Sawyer used to run, but just seems like you guys just keep pumping them out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where they come from, but we're fortunate enough that most years we get at least a few good skill kids, and this year is no different. Last week, John Young was another kid who jumped in and had a huge impact and did very well when he got in there. So we have a good number of skill kids, and it's a good problem to have too many of them. We can kind of get a rotation going where hopefully we can wear teams down as the game goes on.
Coach, as a former player for Londonderry, I'm hoping you can also shed some light on what it's like to play in a big game at Lancer Park. I mean, I've said on this show and just in conversations with folks, certainly Pete in the past, that I tend to think at the high school level where you play the game is usually a little overrated. It's not like playing at Clemson in college football where it's not 80,000 people are watching you. But that said, in talking to both you and Brian O'Reilly earlier this week, you both said that Lancer Park might be the greatest home field advantage in high school football. Certainly one of the top fields because of the layout and all. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about, as a former player, competing on that field when everybody's watching.
So I would agree. It's certainly an advantage for us. And on a night like tonight, where there'll probably be more fans than an average game, I'm sure there'll be quite a few people there. It's a great atmosphere to play in front of, and not only that, obviously with the band playing and stuff. So it can be pretty loud at times. And when the place gets going, it's fun to be in front of. It's fun to be on the field and playing in front of that kind of crowd. So.
Looking down your schedule, Coach, man, you're in a murderer's row right now. Pinkerton tonight, you got Concord next week, then you got Central, you got Exeter, Nashua South, Nashua North. Wow, that's some heavy stuff you got to deal with.
Yeah, no, we haven't even gotten to Concord yet. We haven't gotten that far, so we're just kind of taking one game at a time. Even so much as we tell our kids one play at a time. So. That's really all you can do, and our kids go out and play as hard as they can and let the chips fall wherever they may. So that's pretty much all we can do. Can't get too far ahead of ourselves.
Coach, we really appreciate the time on a Saturday morning. Have fun this weekend with MacPlac weekend, and let's see if you can't stop that streak against Pinkerton tonight.
We're going to try like heck.
All right, that's John and Rich from Londonderry.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you said it is lopsided. Remember when the Red Sox and Yankees, they had that huge rivalry, but it was all Yankees. And that's pretty much what we got here with Pinkerton and Londonderry football anyway. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of made the case in the past that Red Sox-Yankees rivalry wasn't really a rivalry because it was only one team winning. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like a rivalry until you have back and forth. I know people within the rivalry would argue that, and certainly know that the Londonderry folks would. It's a great atmosphere, whether you're playing it at Pinkerton or Londonderry. So a lot of folks should be turning out tonight, I would think, rain or not. So we'll see if they can do it.
Do you think Pinkerton really gets up for it? Because I think they do.
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah. It still mystifies me a little bit because I look at it from like the numbers side of things, and I see 10 straight MacPlac wins for one side, 12 wins overall. The last time Londonderry beat Pinkerton in a MacPlac game was 2001. It's been a long time. And so to me, when I look at the numbers, I say, how can you really get up for this? But in high school, obviously roster turnover every year. You have new kids coming into the program, and then you have new kids developing into leaders each year, and it's their chance to make a statement, like Coach Rich was saying, that they're going to try like heck to get this one tonight for these kids. And so, yeah, I do believe both sides get up for this. It's just something I can't quite always wrap my head around because I, again, look at it from the numbers standpoint. But it's a big game.
I was looking at your First and 10 column yesterday in the Union Leader. Or maybe it was Thursday, I can't remember, but you wrote about John Rich in a film exchange with Brian O'Reilly. And, he was kind of lamenting the fact that they're getting their butts kicked by them every year. And, of course, O'Reilly, ever the optimist for the other guy, says, hey, you guys gave us all we could handle in that playoff game in, 2008? I remember that game. because Londonderry was on the verge of a major upset. That game was at Pinkerton, and they were leading that game late, and Pinkerton had this miraculous comeback and ended up winning that game to move on to the championship game, where I believe they beat Nashua South.
Yep, overtime. Yep.
And then South ended up beating them the next year with David Zacco, correct? Is that the breakdown?
No, 08 was the Pinkerton won that the
then lost to
Miracle,
South.
Yes, Miracle Field, the Miracle Memorial Field was the 08 semifinal that Londonderry probably should have won. I mean, Pinkerton was left for dead in that game, and they couldn't bury him. And then, it was the next week where David Zacco and company came into Derry and won that overtime game.
Well, that wasn't. Londonderry was a playoff team that year, certainly.
Yeah.
But I think they were a 4 seed.
Yep.
And Pinkerton was the number 1 seed,
Yep.
and they almost won that football game. Tom Sawyer was still coaching at that time.
No, that was John.
That was John?
John Rich. That was a devastated team. That was my favorite playoff run of the time I've covered. I've been the lead writer for high school football at the Union Leader. The 08 Division I playoff season was tremendous. John Rich was coaching, and that team, I've seen some crushed teams in the past. That team was crushed, shell-shocked, you name it. They were up 15-6 with 7 minutes and 10 seconds to go, and they couldn't close the deal.
So was that his first year or second year?
It was, it was either first or second. Yeah, it was early on.
So he's been coaching for at least 5 years.
Yeah,
at
he's had
Londonderry.
a few years under his belt now.
I remember when they hired him, and he was on the staff with Sawyer, and Tom Sawyer was great.
Yep.
Just a lot of fun to work with, and real good program at Londonderry.
Yep.
And they were a power.
Yeah.
For a long time in both Division I and Division II. And when he took over, it was like this young kid, was taking over, and man, he's already been around for 5 or 6 years.
He's a veteran.
Yeah, that's crazy. We got to take a timeout, come back, and we're going to talk about the game that we were at last night, both me and Mark attending the North-South rivalry game down in Nashua. They call it the Battle of the Bridge, and I don't quite get that. I know that there's a bridge in the woods. If you drive, it takes probably about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so to get from Nashua South to North or vice versa. But you can just walk through the woods there. And I think that's the bridge that they're talking about. You go over this bridge and, you're kind of on one campus. You go on the other side of the bridge, you're on the other. But they call it the Battle of the Bridge. I don't get it. It's a Nashua battle. I like it. I'm from Nashua. It's a lot of fun. And it was a pretty good game last night, too. We'll talk about that when we return to the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Coming up on 20 minutes of 8 o'clock right here in the New Hampshire High School Football Show, Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler, New Hampshire Union Leader, New Hampshire Sunday News, and NewHampshireGameDay.com. Great stuff from Mark. You check out the website, you go into the paper, and he's always got something good with the 1st and 10 column. Last night he was out at Stello Stadium in Nashua for the annual North-South football game. Always a fun game. Usually a lot of points scored in those games between those two teams. Last night, really no different. 30-17 was the final. Nashua South won it. North actually led 7-0, and it looked like, okay, they got something for them this year. And then 27 straight points in the second quarter by Nashua South, and they took control of it right then and there, ended up winning it. I was impressed by Nashua South last night, strictly because they've got multiple weapons. We all knew about Trevor Knight. The interesting thing about that was last night he comes out wearing number 2. Normally number 7. I talked to him after the game, and he said that his jersey got ripped last week against Concord, and they couldn't get it fixed in time, so he had to go with number 2. So maybe catching North by surprise a couple of times. He told me that they actually were like, "Where's Knight? Where's Knight?" when he first came out there, and he said, "Here I am." He had a pretty good game, running and passing for over 100 yards. But I thought the key for them, Daimier Hyde. Senior running back who didn't play the last couple of years. He had over 100 yards. A strong, tough runner. Kind of a tall kid, but really he impressed me. The first time I saw either team last night, but I came away impressed with Nashua South.
Yeah, I saw Nashua South last week as well. What impressed me about South is how they bounced back from a week ago. They could not do anything offensively against Concord. They lost 20-3. And when was the last time? I even asked Scott Knight this last week after that loss to Concord. When was the last time Nashua South didn't score a touchdown in a game? So what impressed me about South as it relates to Week 5 is that they were able to bounce back, particularly, like you said, after falling behind 7-0. They got back to that scoring points in a hurry type of characteristic that we all know Nashua South teams to have over the recent years anyway. I would say I came away most impressed though with Trevor Knight still. Daimir Hyde had a very nice game. He was a complimentary piece, 115 rushing yards and a touchdown. But to me, Nashua South resembled a lot of what Keene did a week ago when I saw Keene play Bedford. Lucas Lupa is the show for Keene. I mean, I know they have other pieces there, but he's the main piece, and Trevor Knight's the main piece at Nashua South. He's so shifty. I mean, his moves, being able to scramble in and out of traffic to pick up a couple extra yards or to break one for a good gain. That's what impressed me most last night about Nashua South, and in particular Trevor Knight. He really made things go when they needed to play. He was able to make it.
The passing game for South, and I know he hit on a 70-yard touchdown pass to Stephen Choate. That was a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
The passing game doesn't seem as good. I don't think they have as good receivers this year as they did in years past.
I would agree with that, and that's why there's so much responsibility on Trevor Knight's shoulders this year, particularly probably running the football. So it is nice to have a running back like Hyde that can also pick up big yards. I mean, Hyde and Knight accounted for all 47 carries out of the backfield last night for Nashua South. So even though one of those two guys is going to get it, or at least the vast majority in most weeks, you still have to stop them, and Nashua North could not stop those guys last night.
Let's look at Nashua North offensively. One-dimensional. They can run the football. They've got a couple of different guys. Gus Barrasso had a long run, 55-yard run that went down to the one, then he ended up punching in on the next play. I had him for about 70 yards or so last night. Dimitri Jackson, a sophomore that has had some big games so far this year, thought he was relatively quiet. There was a drive in the second half where they were just force-feeding him the ball, and he was getting some yards. But they subbed out their normal starting quarterback, Colby Gunter, and they brought in, and Gunter's a sophomore, a lefty, and then they brought in the junior, Brandon Martin. He came in and ended up throwing a touchdown pass to Kyle Regan, who I think Kyle Regan may be their best player. He's an all-purpose kid, kicks, punts, real good field goal kicker, got a good foot, and a receiver, and also a good defensive back. I mean, this kid is a very, very talented kid, but I just don't see the weapons for North like we've come to know and love, with the Andre Williams and Jamar Gathright and Carcanis and, those type of players that put them in 2 championship games in a row in recent years.
I agree with you completely. They still seem like a young team, and this is the first time I got to see North this year. They seem very small in terms of size, not in terms of heart. I mean, they played hard, but small. And when you're small, I think of Bishop Girton teams that have, in the past, that have been coached by Tony Johnson. He had small teams, but he had fast teams, and that's how you have to attack when you don't have size. And I don't know that North has the quickness. They seemed to have trouble last night, and some of this too, or maybe most of it, was the fact that it was really wet out. I mean, you could see the puddles splashing from underneath the feet of the players last night. So maybe you attribute what I'm about to say to the weather, but they seem to have trouble getting outside last night when they tried to run. And they don't have the size really to pound it through the middle consistently for 4 quarters, or at least they didn't last night. That's what my eyes told me. And rotating 2 quarterbacks in can also be kind of tricky. I mean, it's kind of like the goalie saying, or the quarterback. I mean, you can apply to quarterbacks as well. If you have 2 quarterbacks, do you have any?
Closer by committee in baseball.
By committee, exactly. You can apply it to a number of sports. If you don't have one guy, I mean, is that good or bad? I think North is trying to feel some things out. Again, that's what it seemed like to me. Those are my impressions, my takeaways from the first time seeing them last night.
Yeah, just looking ahead at the schedule for Nashua North. Right now, they're on a 3-game losing streak. They won their first game of the season, had a big second half, winning a game against Alvern, and then they won a tough one against Manchester Memorial. I thought that was a quality win, even early in the season. Look, I think Memorial and North and South are kind of in that same pack Obviously Nashua South is a little bit better, probably than both of those teams, but I think that was a quality win. But then you get Pinkerton; they got beat 42-7. That game was close at halftime. The tough one last week against Manchester Central, 13-10, a quality loss, if you will. If you're the NCAA tournament committee, you would call that a quality loss. Last night against your rival Nashua South, you got a non-league game next week against Milford. We know Jason Roby's history and what
are
probably
we
going to
doing
happen.
with these things? Honest to God, I mean, why?
We don't have to worry about it next
doing?
year, but this
I know.
year we do have to worry about it. You know that no one's playing in that game, right? What can he do? He's got a real young team anyway.
I mean, maybe he would play. Maybe this year I don't know who's playing or not. I mean, that's for next week. But I would guess he's going to play his guys because if what I'm thinking is correct, that he has a young team and trying to build experience and give him playing time, this is the chance to do it. It's just I'm just so tired of these games because look, I understand why a team like Milford would want to do it, a Division III team that gets to play a Division I team, but I have no clue why any Division I team would want to do. Would want to reciprocate. It's the same with like Manchester Central playing Souhegan, for crying out loud. It's just
a couple years ago, I was loving that matchup.
There are certain years where it works out great when you have Stephen Jellison and DJ Petropoulos for Souhegan, and that Souhegan team was top 3 or 4 team in the state. Then it works out. But by and large, these games just those matchups, those particular matchups come around so infrequently that this is maddening to me. This kind of stuff. But we're getting off topic. I'm sorry.
No, no. That's what a talk show is all about.
Yeah,
it's just I love the passion and I love.
I mean, would you agree though?
I totally agree.
Why is North playing Milford? I mean,
I agree with you 100%. I totally agree with you 100%. I mean, Nashua South plays Lowell.
Right.
Usually. Next year, that's going away. I know South has played Chelmsford in the past, and, Alvern plays Tingsboro. They used to anyway. I don't mind that as much.
That's okay to me. Like, to play somebody of I'm big on tests, and I'm sure the coaches would say, well, this is a test. But to me, if you're a school of Nashua North size, go out and schedule an out-of-state team that's comparable talent or enrollment size. Pinkerton, Brockton, huge one. Winnicott, Exeter, still. I mean, for somewhat different reasons because that's a Seacoast rivalry, but still big non-league game. There are just so few of them, and these ones that crop up, like I said before, Central. Go out and schedule a Massachusetts team if you can. I mean, rather than Souhegan.
Didn't they used to play Haverhill in the
back
Thanksgiving Day game?
Yeah, way back in the day. Yeah, before the Turkey Bowl. That was the
Turkey Bowl back then.
Yep.
Well, just North. After this game against Milford next week, that game's at Stello Stadium. By the way, they play Concord, Salem, Exeter, and then they close out with Londonderry. So they could get a couple more wins before this thing's all said and done.
Sure. Look, they played it. They were competitive at times last night, and there's some promise there. In terms of the playoff picture this year, I don't know that they're quite there.
All right, we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the other games that went on last night. I want to get into that Keene Spalding situation, that Hugo Bowl Swamp, because that's what it was last night. That's one of those cases where they probably should have canceled the game. If you haven't seen the highlights, check it out on Channel 9. They're running the highlights throughout the course of the news program they got. It was unbelievable. I mean, you're talking almost knee-deep water, muddy, nasty water in the middle of the football field. What do you know? The final score was 6-0, and it wasn't 2 field goals, folks. No. We'll talk about that one when the New Hampshire High School Football Show returns on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Heading up towards the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. Want to thank John Rich from Londonderry. He came on earlier this hour to talk a little bit about that Pinkerton game. Mac Plaque Weekend, 30th annual Mac Plaque Weekend, Londonderry and Pinkerton. Pete Terrier, Mark Thaler here on the radio each and every Saturday, 7 to 9 a.m. WGIR AM 610, 96.7 The Wave. Also have John Kesty in the house, nhsportspage.com, the video cast of the show. You got to love it. If you can't wake up, you just have stuff to do in the morning, whatever it is, you can watch the show, listen to the show on your time, commercial free too. That's not a bad deal. John have it posted up on nhsportspage.com later on tonight, so you can check out what those two dudes on the radio and what the guys that you read their stuff either online or in the newspaper see what we look like. And I'll tell you what, the players last night that took part in that Keene Spalding game, you couldn't really tell what they looked like after the game. They were all brown because it was a mud bowl last night. They should have called that game, don't you think? Or do you old school and you want to see that type of stuff?
Well, I'm going to contradict myself. I'm going to say no because it's football and play in the elements. Selfishly, as a reporter, I hate these games that are, when it rains like this, because if you don't have a decent press box and you get stuck, you can't do it. You can't keep any stats. You can't keep notes in a monsoon. So how's that for straddling the fence?
I was going to say, yeah. Why don't you go run for public office or something? Right?
In terms of the game itself, I would like to see the games played. I think the kids enjoy it as well. Whether it's snow or mud or rain, whatever it is. I think they like playing in that. Probably maybe not all the time, but on a rare occasion, for a random week when it happens like this, I think they would like to play in it. From that angle, I would like to see them play the games. Selfishly, from my angle, it's a mess, and trying to keep track of stuff, you can't do it. So I am glad when they postpone until it's a little bit drier out.
So 6-0 Keene victorious, bouncing back from that loss against Bedford last week in Keene, 25-24. Lucas Lupa, 22-yard hookup with Matt Del Vecchio at the final play of the first half. They scored a touchdown. I don't know what the deal was on the kick, or if they even got the snap off or whatever, but the fact is it was a 6-0 game. Neither team able to do much at all. I know that they took Lucas Lupa out after that touchdown pass and didn't play in the second half, or might have played a little bit. But if I'm Coach John Lupa, I'm saying, you know what? Well, our defense is going to stand here, and we're going to do what we did a couple of weeks ago against Goffstown. We're going to sit the guys because we don't want anybody getting hurt in this mess.
Yeah, and they have some guys on defense that can make stops. You certainly saw him on TV last night, Alex Parento. He's a big name for them, certainly on defense.
Big dude.
Fast, physical, aggressive. He's good, very good. And I know I mentioned him last week. Jim Heaney, as a defensive lineman, is also a great piece in that defense. So those two guys, surrounded by a number of other players, I imagine Coach Lupa felt we get a 6-0 lead, and we ought to be able to, with the elements being what they are, we ought to be able to hold this lead.
Well, what do you know about Keene now? I mean, you can't really tell too much from that game last night, but you've seen them in person. They're a team that a lot of people had a lot of high hopes for, and I think that they're in the mix for sure in Division II. Mm-hmm. Spalding, not as good this year as they were last year, although last year they started off poorly, and then they won a bunch of games in a row and made the playoffs. I don't know that that's going to be able to happen for them this year. They've got a real tough schedule. I mean, Keene last night, next week you got Winnicott, then you got Manchester West. That's the team that you should potentially win. It could be a good game. West is a little bit better this year. Mm-hmm. Then you got BG, you got Bedford, and then they have another one of those doesn't count games against Concord in the last game of the regular season.
Yeah.
I think Spalding's in trouble. I don't see them making a second straight playoff appearance.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't see it before the season started. Last year was a special year for them. They started 0-4, I believe it was, and then rebounded nicely to make the playoffs. 0-4 overall was that start. But look, I'm still high on Keene. I think they're a very good team. I think they did take a little bit of a hit last week in not being able to hold 3 different leads against Bedford. But that also spoke to what Bedford's talent and what that team was able to do. But Keene is still very much in the mix. In a game like this, where you overcome 8 fumbles and it's a total mud bowl, I mean, take the final score for what it's worth. It's a win. That's got to be a long bus ride as well for them going up to out to Rochester. So they battle the elements. They overcome a long bus ride. They overcome 8 fumbles. They get a good win. They bounce back from a deflating loss. They're still very much in the mix, and I still consider them a championship contender in Division II.
Keene's got Dover next week, then a big one in Keene against Winnicott. I might take Lupa up on a dinner invitation in a couple of weeks. Winnicott at Keene, that should be a good one.
Yep.
Keene's got West after that, then BG in Nashua, and then they close out against Timberlane. Speaking of Rochester, I'm going to be there tomorrow. Grand opening of the new Buffalo Wild Wings in Rochester. I'm hosting a Patriots party.
Nice.
So I'm hoping to see some of those Red Raider players, Red Raider fans come on out and say hello, giving away Patriots tickets, all kinds of good stuff. Be there until halftime. The brand new Buffalo Wild Wings in Rochester. We'll see you there. Another hour on the other side of 8.
To be mediocre, but we have the opportunity to play like gods for the next half of football. But we can't be afraid to lose. There's no room for fear in this game.
This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
If you can't stand the way this place is, take yourself to higher places.
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
I don't want them to gain another yard.
You blitz all night. If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
And it's just disappointing that every time me and you go to the same game, it's blowout. We will not make that mistake again.
And Mark Thaler.
As far as I'm concerned, there's only one poll, and people can take shots at me if they want for that, but it's just imitation's the sincerest form of flattery.
Take yourself to higher places.
And I'll offer this up to you. Next time you actually make a trip out to Keene, if you want to come next Friday to see Bedford Keene, I'll buy you dinner.
Hour number 2 of the program, the New Hampshire High School Football Show. Pete Terrier along with Mark Thaler. Coming up this hour, Peter Colcord, the head coach of the Manchester Memorial football team. His team going up against Central. That's a noon start over at Shabbat McDonough Field. Can't wait to go check out that Queen City battle, and also try and talk to Coach Colcord about what the heck is going on. I mean, the big controversy that came out in your newspaper, Mark, the New Hampshire Union Leader, talking about player transferring from Central to Memorial. The dad, all proud, calls you guys up, think he's got a good story, and says, my son, you know, he's transferring because he's going to get some more playing time here. Whoop, 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 whoop. Here comes the transfer police out of the NHIAA, and they're going to crack down potentially on both schools' program. Crazy, crazy situation. We'll talk with Coach Colcord, try and find out what he can say about that and what he's willing to say, whatever. And we'll also discuss it just on an opinion basis as this program goes on. But there were some football games played last night. There were some games postponed to today. So the scoreboard a little bit light from a Friday night, but there's plenty of stuff to talk about coming up today and tonight. Let's go to the scoreboard. It is brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and their Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults it's against the law to provide alcohol to minors. Don't do it. Here's Mark's scoreboard.
Pete, 7 games played last night in NHIAA football, 2 in Division I. The game we were at last night at Stello Stadium, number 10 Nashua South beat Nashua North, that is, 30-17. North scored the game's first touchdown. South responded with 27 points in the second quarter. Trevor Knight was the star of the game. South's quarterback ran for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also threw for 109 yards and a touchdown pass. Daimir Hyde had 115 rushing yards and a 7-yard touchdown as well. Again, South 30, North 17. The other Division I game, number 2 Exeter rebounded from last week's upset loss against rival Winnacunnet. The Bluehawks beat number 7 Concord 28-0 out on the Seacoast. Ethan Joyce, Tyler Grant, Jamie Vogt, names that folks at this point in the season are probably familiar with. They all scored touchdowns for the Bluehawks in that 4-touchdown win. In Division II, only 1 touchdown scored. It was a 6-0 win for the number 8 Keene Blackbirds. They went to Spalding and won that game. Lucas Lupa to Matt Delvecchio, 22-yard touchdown pass as the first half expired. The time on the clock expired, that is. Keene High School overcame 8 fumbles in the game. Still sounds funny to say that, 8 fumbles, but when you see the video clips on Channel 9, you understand why. Again, 6-0 win for the Blackbirds. In Division 4, 3 games were played. Trinity with a 52-0 win over Lebanon. The Pioneers continue to pound their opponents. Junior Austin Chambers, 4 touchdowns last night at Gill Stadium, 3 of them in the first half, running on the ground, 26, 15, and 19-yarders. He also had a second-half kick return touchdown. 89 yards was that was the 4th touchdown for Chambers. Romeo Masuko also with 2 TDs for the Pioneers. Those runs of 68 and 13 yards. Laconia into the win column finally. That sounds funny to say, but the Sachems finally cracked the win column. They beat Kings with 22-6, and Kennett knocked off Hanover 18-7. Last game to report from last night, Division 6, Mascoma 40, Raymond 6.
I'll run down the games in the divisions today. Division 1, we talked about the Memorial Central game at Memorial. That game kicks off at noon. I'm going to be heading out to that game to check on the Queen City matchup. You got Londonderry Londonderry at Pinkerton tonight. Actually, it's Pinkerton at Londonderry. All right, 7 o'clock kickoff at Lancer Park, part of the MAC plaque. The cherry on top of that one, we had John Rich from Londonderry on in the first hour. As I mentioned about Memorial Central, we will have Peter Colcord on coming up just a couple of minutes from now. Division II, big one tonight in Nashua, Stello Stadium, Bedford at Bishop Girton. Merrimack takes on West this afternoon at 1, and then Winnicott at Dover, 2 o'clock. Can Winnicott win and keep that number 1 ranking? We shall see. Division III, Pembroke at Merrimack Valley. That game's at 3. Alvern at Milford at 6. Goffstown at Portsmouth. I was hoping to see that game last night. It got moved to today. Goffstown at Portsmouth, 1 o'clock today. You got Conval at Seahegan tonight at 7 o'clock in Amherst. In Division IV, huge game. Wyndham at Plymouth. The winner gets the inside track for that number 1 seed in D4. That game kicks off at 1:30. Both teams undefeated. You got St. Thomas taking on John Stark at 7. The Saints trying to bounce back from their first loss of the season. Last week snapped, I think, an 11-game winning streak for them that included an undefeated season last year, a championship season in D5. Speaking of D5, Stevens at Interlakes Moultonborough, 2:30 this afternoon. You got Monadnock taking on Pelham at 6. Somersworth at Sanborn at 3 o'clock. Kearsarge takes on Epping Newmarket at 2 o'clock. Division 6, Franklin at Campbell. Josiah Wade having a huge year in Division 6 for the Campbell Cougars. That game at 1:30. Guilford at Newfound at 2. You got Winnisquam at Farmington Newt at 1:30. Bishop Brady at Newport at 1:30 this afternoon. And then a couple of non-league games. Hollis Brookline at Bow at 2 o'clock. Timberlane at Salem at 2. Everybody seems to be picking Salem. I go with Timberlane in that game. I think they're going to beat the Blue Devils because I think Timberlane is decent, and I don't think Salem is very good this year at all. It is certainly a real building year for that program. Mark, just wanted to get into the game tonight. Bishop Girton at Bedford. I mean, what a great game. I personally, for some reason, and I don't know what it is, I just can't give BG the respect that they deserve. I mean, they are the defending champs. They've won, 6 out of the last 7 titles in D2, and I got them ranked number 7 on my Power Poll ballot. This is a good football team, but I just can't move them up for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my Nashua public school roots, and I got to root against BG, but for some reason, I just can't give them the respect that they probably deserve.
We're agreeing a lot today, Pete. Yeah, I picked Bedford in this game. I had Bedford, I think, at 4 on my ballot for this week, week 5. Bedford's very good. I know BG's still good, but I don't know. I kind of sense a shift in that maybe the changing of the guard in Division 2. It just seems like that. There are a lot of contenders this year where in the past, I know maybe we've said that or other coaches have said that, but it seems to actually be true this year that there are some teams that could really give BG a run for its money, and I think the Bulldogs are certainly one of those teams. I wrote the feature for the Union Leader earlier this week on Bedford and its passing attack. It might be the most balanced passing attack in the state. They have one of the state's top quarterbacks, and they have 4 of the top receivers. And one of them's a running back in Dylan York, who's the check down receiver in that system. But they have 4 guys they can throw to, and I guess like you, I see those playmakers giving BG some fits. We'll see if it happens, but I haven't given BG respect for, I guess, some time because I've been picking against them since our show came on the air last year, right? I mean, I was picking Dover to win, and so why change now?
Well, look, I don't know what it is. I think it's just perception. I got to imagine that BG's going to be down this year, and I just can't buy into it. They are number 4 in the Power Poll. No thanks to me and you, because I got them at number 7.
Yeah, that surprises me because I'd have to call up their schedule. They've beaten some of the lower echelon teams in Division 2 thus far, I believe.
Merrimack, they beat. Who else do they play? I mean, I can look up their schedule. I mean, you got them at 6, so you're giving them a little bit more credit than I am.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're still in the bottom half of the top 10 as far as I'm concerned. I mean, so they've beaten West, which is on the rise compared to where West has been, but still, I mean, they're not a title contender. Merrimack, which is at the bottom, and Dover, which is we imagine will be in the mix, but they started slow, and so BG coming into tonight has the heavy hitters still to play. They're playing Bedford tonight. They still have Keene and Winnicott to close out their season. to me, there are some other teams I think that might be better than the Cardinals this year.
All right, let's get into this. You went on and did this huge explanation on why the hell you did this, and I still don't get it. Winnicott, number 1, obviously. We talked about that on the show last week. After they beat Exeter, they were number 1. Although some people in other polls didn't think so.
Yeah.
They voted Exeter number 1, even though they just got beat by Winnicott head-to-head. You also did something what I thought was kind of peculiar. And you obviously thought that other people might think that because you went out of your way to explain why you did it. You got Pinkerton number 2 on your ballot ahead of Exeter, who you know full well because you were at the game. I saw you there. We chatted. Exeter beat Pinkerton at Pinkerton without Colby Swain, without Logan Laurent. I know you explained yourself, but please do it here on the radio because I just don't get that one, Mark.
I mean, I could probably just reread the post I put on New Hampshire Game Day. As far as I'm concerned, I'm the only one of the 8 power poll voters that got this right. I swear, I promise you.
Convince the rest of the world now.
Well, all right, I will just, I can't say it better than the way I wrote it back on Monday after I posted my ballot. So I'll just read from the actual post. And I said, before the emails flood into my inbox, I'm well aware that Exeter defeated Pinkerton and Derry on Saturday, on September 8th. I covered the Week 2 game, as you just mentioned, Pete. But there has to, here's my explanation. There has to be a penalty in the power poll for losing, except in the rarest of instances. And I put the example. See Pinkerton's 2010 team that lost a late lead at perennial heavyweight Brockton. At the time, Brockton was ranked number 4 in Massachusetts. That was the lone instance where losing didn't hurt the New Hampshire team in the power poll. I said Pinkerton, this is last Saturday now, Pinkerton on Saturday against Salem won by 4 touchdowns, 35-7. And the previously second-ranked Astros dropped to number 3. So they won by 4 touchdowns and dropped a spot in the rankings. It makes 0 sense to me. I further explain. Exeter, which I acknowledge is a tremendous football team, I picked Exeter to win that game against Pinkerton. So, you know, let's get that out there too. But I said Exeter...
And I picked Pinkerton.
Exeter, let's not forget, Exeter won a squeaker of a head-to-head game with the Astros. This was not the 49-0 Exeter over Central matchup. This was a game that was a toss-up, and it could have gone either way. And quite frankly, look, Exeter won the game and they made the plays. But from Pinkerton's perspective, if they don't shoot themselves in the foot a few times, it's probably a different outcome.
They were right there. They could have won that game. I'll give you that. But let me ask you this before you go any further.
Sure.
Isn't dropping Exeter from 1 to 2 a penalty?
It's not enough when you take Well, it's not enough when you take into account what some of the other teams in the poll did. And you have to take into account, this is the purpose of the power poll is to establish where teams fit in the hierarchy on a week-to-week basis. And let's also, I'm not saying this is you, Pete, I'm just making a general statement here that being number 3 in the state is not exactly a slap in the face.
No, it's not, but some people perceive it that way.
Well, of course they,
Programs
there's no question.
And fans.
There's no question about that, and I would just like to say that it's not a slap in the face. There are a number of teams that would love to be in the top 10, let alone be ranked number 3. But when you take into account a team that loses, again, absent from the rarest of instances, when you take into account losing and what other teams certainly high in the poll do, there has to be some give and take, or things have to shake out. And my point was just that Exeter won a squeaker of a game with the Astros. It was a 24-20 game. And you also have to consider this. This was the big one. And I believe you feel this way because we've talked about this before. The Blue Hawks, I wrote, as the state's top team, lost to an opponent from a lower division. While Exeter and Winnicott were league rivals in Division II for years, that's currently not the case. It's Division I versus Division II. And in my book, that fact takes away from Exeter's 4-point win over the Astros as far as power poll voting for Week 5 is concerned. It's not going to take away from playoff standing or playoff positioning. Exeter's still in the driver's seat. They could go unbeaten in league play heading into the postseason. But in terms of power poll voting for Week 5, let's face it, the Division I Blue Hawks lost to a Division II team. And it's my belief that in non-league games, this is what I was getting at, and I believe you feel the same way. It's my belief anyway, though, that in non-league games, the team from the higher division is supposed to win.
Supposed to on paper, but this year we know that Division II is better top to bottom.
I don't know that.
Than Division I.
I wouldn't.
You don't think so?
I wouldn't. I've never said that.
How many teams in Division II? You can run down the list of teams in Division II. And all right, you got Exeter and Pinkerton, which are obviously a notch above the rest of the Division I. You agree with me?
Yeah.
All right. Start going down the top teams in Division II.
That's a different argument. I'll answer your question gladly, but that's a different argument. The argument that I won't speak for you. I believe you. I believe you feel this way.
Generally, I do.
Generally, I mean,
generally I do, but this year I think it's different. I just think
you can't pick and choose.
But if you go to you can. It's like it's a weekly poll. You can change your mind from week to week, and that's what you're supposed to do. But if I look at Division II and I see Winnicott, I see Bedford, I see in no particular order Bedford, Keene, Bishop Girton. I see all those 4 teams, and I'm probably missing somebody who I'm not talking about here. But I think Bedford, Keene, Winnicott, and Bishop Girton, those are 4 teams that are all like pretty much on the level of Exeter and Pinkerton. Maybe a little bit below Exeter and Pinkerton. Obviously, Winnicott's not because they beat them. I just think it's a deeper league.
You think Bedford, Keene, Bishop Girton, and what was the
Winnicott
are on the same level as Exeter and Pinkerton?
I said they're a little bit below those teams, but I mean, if you put those 4 as a group, all right, I think that those 4 teams are better. Here's the best way to say it, I think. Those 4 teams, Bedford, Keene, Winnicott, and Bishop Girton, are better than anybody else in Division I except for Pinkerton and Exeter. And Winnicott beat Exeter. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
I don't see any problem with that.
I disagree.
Well, here I think is the most important question. We got to move on.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And I know somebody called up off the air and had a question, I assume, for you.
Oh.
And we'll get to that with Jen in a second. But if they played today, perfect conditions, weather not a factor, neutral field,
neutral, right?
Pinkerton and Exeter,
yeah.
Who wins that game?
Today?
Yes. You better say Pinkerton if you voted them number 1.
I would say Pinkerton.
Okay.
Well, I didn't vote Pinkerton number 1.
I mean ahead of Exeter. That's what I'm saying.
This week, yeah,
right.
This week.
So you think that Pinkerton at this point, if they played, and that's all you need to say. That's all you need to say. I think if these 2 teams played right now, that Pinkerton would beat Exeter, and that gives you reason to put them ahead of Exeter in the poll.
Well, yeah,
Simple
but
as
I mean, look. I'm not afraid to defend my position.
I know you're
and
not.
to me, it's got to be more than just saying, "Hey, I think this week that this team would." Yeah, ultimately, if you boil it down, yeah, that's what it comes down to. But I like to give a little bit more explanation. And to me, you can't flip flop or pick and choose that. Well, I've always applied the logic that a Division I team should be Division II, except for this year or this particular game. That's
you're
my point.
I'm a little bit wishy-washy in that situation. That's okay. It's not a problem. It's just that's what's the beauty of this poll.
Absolutely, yeah.
The conversation.
Yeah.
Jen, what was the question that they didn't want to come on the air and talk to us, but they whispered in your ear?
It was a question for both of you from Joe Moriarty.
Oh boy.
He would like to know
A
if
Trinity
you guys
homer.
think Trinity will beat Plymouth.
Do we think Trinity? Well, they lost to Plymouth and got blown out by them.
It wasn't even close.
And probably, I know I picked Trinity to win the game going into that game. Did you?
Nope.
So you picked
I
Plymouth.
picked Plymouth, yeah.
All right. I say if they meet again, and I haven't seen Plymouth, I say Plymouth wins that game. You?
Yeah, I agree with you because if they meet again, barring a collapse in the regular season from Plymouth, which I don't foresee happening. The only way that the game is going to be played at Gill, if they were to play head-to-head, is that Plymouth would have to have a worse record than Trinity at this point. So, in all likelihood, if there's a rematch, Trinity's going to have to go back up to Plymouth, and I don't see that happening. Last year's win, which was with a different team for Trinity, they had some key playmakers that are no longer there. That was one that Plymouth let get away, and I don't see that happening this year. Plymouth is very, very good, and I think very focused and determined based on how last year went for them. Their only 2 losses were to Trinity, but I don't see that happening this year.
All right, there you go, Joe. Thanks for calling in. We appreciate it. Next time you can come on the air and ask us. 645-6161. I know this is a topic that people are going to want to discuss. Coming up next, Peter Colcourt, head coach of the Manchester Memorial Crusaders, his team getting set for a game just a few hours from now. The game kicks off at noon, Shabbat McDonough Field at Memorial High School, Central and Memorial. But a big controversy surrounding both of those 2 teams' football programs the week of the game. And we'll see what Coach Colcourt can say about it. I'm sure he won't be able to say much, but I certainly have some opinions on the situation and what's going on. And I know you do as well, Mark. So we'll take a quick time out, come back with Coach Colcourt. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Queen City rivalry game today, noon, Shabbat McDonough Field, Memorial High School in Manchester. Here to talk about it with us, the head coach of the Memorial Crusaders, Peter Colcourt. Good morning, Coach.
Morning, Pete. How you doing?
I'm
Thanks
doing
for having me on.
Well, no problem. I mean, look, I I saw Mark texted me earlier this week and said we got Coach Colcourt coming on to talk about the Memorial Central game, and I was excited because it is a awesome matchup when you guys play. Unfortunately, with the story that came out with the transfer situation from Central to Memorial, and now the NHIAA is looking into it, it has morphed this game, which, you know, really has a lot of hype around it anyway, and it's just kind of blown it up and taken the focus off of the game on the field, unfortunately. But we have to ask you about it. I mean, what has that done to your program this week in preparation for this game? Because there's obviously some distractions going on.
Yeah, we've had a few distractions, but not on the field. The kids had probably the best week of practice they've had all year. They've done a really good job in just concentrating on what we need to get done. We try and teach the kids that life's about challenges, and sometimes you've got to overcome them or ignore them and move on. And they've done a very good job of that. I'm very proud of my players. They work very hard and listen very well.
Coach, what specifically did you tell your players in those talks? I guess the reason I'm asking that is we've read in the paper certainly that, or it's been reported that the NHIA will give its ruling at some point in the near future, and it could possibly involve some sanctions, whether it be forfeiting wins or the ultimate would be a postseason ban of some kind. I mean, have kids asked you questions about that specifically, and what has your response been?
Yeah, they did in the very beginning, but we assured them that the NHIA will come down fair on this, and we don't believe that either school has done anything improper. The transfer was done last spring, and it was for reasons of academics and a few other things. It had nothing to do with athletics at all. None of us thought anything about it. As a matter of fact, when I heard that this person was coming, I called Coach Ray, because we both feel strongly about kids playing where they belong, and talked about it. And he agreed that it was the situation that it was.
Coach, I'm not looking for you to, make a controversial statement and get the NHIAA mad at you, but in my opinion, this situation is about the kid and the parents, and the two schools signed off on it. Yeah, maybe a mistake was made by the parent calling up the union leader and saying, hey, this is a great story, my kid's going to get more playing time now that he's playing here. I think that when you say the athletic part of it had nothing to do with it, I'll do respect that it has to have something to do with it. I mean, the kid wants to play. The parent wants his kid to play. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that could be one of the reasons. And I think it could be a valid reason. But he's doing what he's doing for his child. And I don't think that the state should really have any say in that. Maybe I'm wrong. But for the NHIAA to threaten, I see Pat Corbin, and I like the guy, and I think he does a pretty good job. A lot of people criticize him. To see him come down and say, we could nail both teams' programs, all sports, for 3 years, seems a little heavy-handed to me.
Well, I from the way I understand it, that's the ultimate punishment for infractions. I don't believe that Mr. Corbin was saying that that's a likely scenario here. I think it was that it's possible in situations that things could go that far. We haven't felt that from what the explanations we've gotten, that it will happen like that. And as far as a student transferring, it happens all the time, especially in Manchester, where we have 3 public high schools for a lot of different reasons. And if athletics becomes a benefit of that transfer, it's usually an accidental benefit. It's not because they're doing it just for that.
How many questions have you answered, Coach, in the last few days on this topic?
Oh my God, I've spent a lot of time doing that. As I said to John Habib the other day when he interviewed me, it hasn't really been that much of a distraction, if at all, really, from my players. It's been more of a distraction for me in answering those kind of questions. We have a lot of support, too. We run a very good, clean program. We've done a good job in getting kids out and getting them graduated and all that. So people have been very supportive in asking me what's been going on.
Well, how about we talk some football, Coach?
Sure, that sounds great.
Noontime kickoff at your place at Manchester Memorial, Central Memorial, always a good one. Even when Memorial is a little bit down, you guys seem to be up over the last couple of years. You've got some good wins on the docket already. You beat Londonderry last week out there. You beat a tough Goffstown team, a Division III team, but that features Connor Benjamin, had a huge game, and you guys were able to beat them by 1 point. You lost a tough one at Nashua North, and then Concord got you pretty good a couple of weeks ago, but you always seem to come to play against Manchester Central, especially. You beat them last year. What is it about the rivalry that just juices things up for kids on both sides?
Well, I think that's what it is, the rivalry, the closeness of the two schools, how competitive they've been. The kids know each other. A lot of them have played on teams together growing up or competed against each other since they were young. And it just continues, and it magnifies because it's high school football. And the kids, they look forward to it. This is the big one for them every year. Like I said, we don't need to jazz them up. They do it naturally.
I know I asked you this, Coach, during the week for some stuff in the paper, so I'll ask you for the radio as well. Any talk about what this win means for the Turkey Bowl?
Well, the point system, as I know it right now, is the same as last year. So it'll come down to whoever wins the most games between us, West, Central, and Trinity. And both Central and Trinity are doing very well, so we just have to keep pace.
Do you like that way they do it? Because in years past, with Trinity being in Division 4 or even Division 5, I think one of the years when it was like that, they had a little bit of an easier path to a better schedule. Now, I think that's a little different this year because Division 4 is loaded, a lot of good teams there, and a chance for Trinity to lose some games. You guys have been a Division 1 program all along, and you face a tough team each and every week. It seemed to favor Trinity a little bit, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I wanted to see Central and Trinity just to see how Trinity would do against them, but it kind of leaves your team and Manchester West out in the cold, at least it has over the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. I think what the committee has tried to do is make the best of a bad situation where we're not all playing in the same division anymore. It was a lot easier back when all four of us were in Division 1, and then even when Trinity was in Division 2, there was a better system for that. But now this is the best of a bad situation. I think we've had a lot of meetings in the past on what would be the best way to keep everybody involved, and this is the one that's come up, and so we're all going to live with it, and whatever happens, happens.
Coach, you guys won last year's game against Central, right? That was the wild one toward the end.
28-24, yes.
That's right. So can you just talk a little bit about, we've had a number of conversations over the last couple of years, certainly about the need for your teams, your players to play discipline, to play within the role you have for them for the team. And at times it's happened and at other times it hasn't. Can you just, has that been a theme that you've touched on this week as you've prepared for Central, the need to play disciplined and just worry about your specific role?
Yeah, absolutely. I've told you before, Mark. That's our main goal every year with our players is to be a disciplined football program. We want to emulate teams like Pinkerton and Exeter. They're very, very disciplined, and their record shows that. And I keep pointing that out to the players, and we try, and we know that going against a team like Central, if we don't do things the way we're coached, we're going to get ourselves in a bad spot and find ourselves behind it and possibly not be able to catch up when you're playing such a quality team as a Central.
Coach, you've got a playmaker by the name of Jared Umbati who had a huge game last week against Londonderry, almost 300 yards rushing, scored 5 touchdowns, also kicking for you guys. And, if you're a fantasy football player and you had Jared Umbati last week, man, you'd be in good shape. Yeah. Talk about him because he's a kid that, I didn't know a whole lot about before the game last week, but he certainly has been putting up some big numbers for you guys.
Yeah, Jared, he had the kind of game last week that I've been waiting for him to have since he was a freshman. He's one of the fastest kids in our school and one of the fastest kids in the state. And he just put it all together last week. Of course, our offensive line opened some good holes, but he had to have some vision. All of his 293 yards came on one particular play where he has a couple of different options on that, and he saw the options every time he carried the ball. Last Friday night against Londonderry, he did an outstanding job. He's a great kid. He works hard all the time, has for the past 4 years, but late just seemed to click last Friday night, and I hope it stays on all the way through the rest of the season. As far as the kicking, we're not indulged in good kickers at Memorial on the football team, haven't been for a long time. So he's kind of been put into that emergency situation. He just jumps in. We seem to have every Thursday when we go through our walk through, we audition more kickers, and he keeps coming up to the front. Not that he's going to compete with any of the Division I kickers, but again, he does a good job.
Coach, here's a chance to give a shout-out or certainly to recognize by name that offensive line of yours. I know you said back in the preseason that you anticipated coming into the year that was going to be the strength of the team, and you told me last week that to this point in the season they've lived up to that expectation.
Yeah, they have. We kind of fell down against Concord. They didn't have a very good game that night, but they more than made up for it last week against Londonderry. Like I said, 293 yards. I'm sure Jared would be the first to admit that if it wasn't for that offensive line, he wouldn't have anywhere near that. And that offensive line is left tackle is Nate Steele, left guard is Umir Sheik, our center is Spencer Duhamel, our right guard is Alex Andrada, and our right tackle is Jake Costa. And those are the guys that did the bulk of the work last week against Londonderry.
Coach, we really appreciate the time, and we apologize for having to pepper you about those questions. Everybody else is doing it too. And hopefully the ruling will come down soon, and it will be fair, and there will be no repercussions. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's a huge deal. I think a lesson can be learned. You know, if you're a parent and this situation happens, zip it. Don't be making phone calls to media outlets and saying that, even if you mean well. Coach, we'll see you out there at the game today, 12 o'clock kickoff. I'm glad that it's 12 o'clock kickoff because I can get to my weekend a little bit faster after the game. So thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll see you out there this afternoon.
All right, Pete, Mark, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it every time it happens.
All right,
Thank you.
Coach.
Thanks, Coach.
Peter Colcord from Manchester Memorial. Kickoff noon. Shabbat, McDonough Field, Memorial, and Central. Take a quick break, come back. We'll talk a little bit more about that situation, and then we'll kind of go around the state of New Hampshire from the games that we saw last night, the games that are coming up today and tonight. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. You can catch it a couple of different ways. Online, the video cast, nhsportspage.com. You can see the show as we do it. We'll post it up there so you can watch it, listen to it on your time. Commercial free as well. So that's pretty cool stuff. Also, live on the radio each and every Saturday morning during the football season, 7 to 9 a.m. on two fine stations, WGIR AM 610 around Manchester and on 96.7 The Wave on the New Hampshire Seacoast. We'll be right back after these.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Mark, you forget about the power of radio, you know, with the internet technology and the fact that I just mentioned you can catch the show on the web, and you know you got iHeartRadio now, which helps get us out all over the place. But the power of the radio is still pretty strong. I just got a phone call from friend Tommy Amin, who is down in Framingham, Mass.
Nice.
And he's listening on 610 a.m.
Beautiful.
That's pretty cool.
That's excellent.
That's pretty cool. That's some reach,
yeah,
as you call it in the business. Yeah. Mark, we talked a little bit off air about the situation with Memorial and the transfer situation and the controversy that's going on there. And I know you didn't write the story, you didn't get the story. So you felt a little bit uncomfortable talking about it because you don't really know details or anything like that. But I told Coach Colcord that I think it's ridiculous. It's much ado about nothing, and it was something that was agreed upon by both schools. And if it was a shady situation, why would both schools sign off on it? And now with the NHIAA and Pat Corbin, you're making some statements about worst case scenario. kind of beating his chest a little bit, or at least that's the way it came off. And it may not have been meant that way, but when you're doing a story and you're writing down stuff or recording stuff, you're going to take the sensational stuff and you're going to kind of highlight that, because that's what really gets people interested and excited. But I'd just like to get your opinion. We know this stuff happens all the time. There's a lot of transfers through all sports, especially in the city of Manchester. Do you think this is that huge a deal? What is the big problem, and where do you think this thing's all going to shake out ultimately?
Well, there's a lot of questions still to be answered. I think that's the biggest thing is we don't, at least I'll speak for myself. I don't know exactly what happened. I don't. You have the father who initially called up saying that his son transferred so that he'd get more playing time.
Stupid. Not smart
Not
move.
smart, but I imagine he probably didn't know it was not smart to say. But nonetheless, that was his initial statement to the folks at the newspaper. You have people like Coach Colcourt just came on the radio and said it was not about athletic reasons.
He said it had nothing to do with it. I kind of called him out on that and said, look, Coach, something had to do with that.
Well, right. I like Coach Colcourt. I respect him. I don't know exactly who to believe in this case. So it depends. Your question to me, like, how do I think things will shake out? It really depends on what the findings are. If the NHIAA, and I'll stick with what initially came out to answer your question. If the NHIAA finds that the kid transferred for athletic purposes, then yeah. The school should be penalized.
The school, all sports,
well, maybe
both schools.
Well, maybe not all sports.
For 3 years?
Maybe.
Ugh.
This is not. This is division. This is New Hampshire high school athletics. It's not major college football. Because actually, this is funny. Phil Crosdale and Mike Doyle of Bear and the Big Guy had me on for a phone interview on Thursday night for their show, and they asked me what happened. At the time, what had come out was that this is all based on transferring for athletic purposes. So again, let me be clear. I'm basing my opinion on if that proves to be the case. If it proves to be the case, if the case ends up being that he transferred for other reasons and athletics being able to play at Memorial was an additional benefit, then this is a moot point. But if anybody transfers for an athletic purpose solely so they can get more playing time, that is a problem. And yeah, I know it's the worst kept secret that this has been going on for years.
It happens. We all admit that.
Absolutely. But at least from my job anyway, or from my perspective, you have to have evidence to be able to at least write or report it. You can hear stuff, but if you don't have people on the record saying it, you can't really do much about it. So here's a case where something comes out in an on-the-record conversation, then the floodgates kind of open, and this topic has light shed on it. But again, let me be clear. If the reason that this individual transferred was to get more playing time, and it might have been a slip through the cracks kind of mistake in terms of paperwork and in the transfer process, the fact is it happened, and there has to be a penalty. And there has to be probably a pretty big penalty to deter folks from doing this in the future, or to ensure that people dot their I's and cross their T's, dot their I's in terms of submitting paperwork moving forward. So it might be a big penalty. Maybe it will be very little, or maybe it will be nothing. Maybe the NHI will say, you know what, it gave everybody a good scare, and now everybody knows, and we'll move forward from here. But I find it hard to blame the NHIA if they want to crack down and say enough's enough.
I think it's harsh if they end up doing that. I think it's unfair. Look, this had nothing to do with Jack Quirk's Memorial Girls basketball team, although he's the athletic coordinator at the school.
Right.
But why should they be penalized for something that had nothing to do with them?
Well, that's true. But let's keep it in the realm of just football. I agree with you. If it were to be a ban, or some kind of a postseason ban or sanctions for all sports, that's probably
for 3 years.
Whether it's 1 year or not. I mean, 1 year, 2 years, or three. That's. I agree. That would be too much to extend this to all sports. Let's keep it to the sport where this happened to take place. If you have to penalize the football program, if they find, I can't say this enough, if they find out that this was an athletic purposes only transfer, you have a problem with it if they were to say,
no,
I'm going to ban the team from, we're going to forfeit wins, or we're going to ban them from the postseason.
No, I don't, and it's unfortunate because I feel bad for the parent, I feel bad for the kid.
Sure, I do too.
The parent who made that phone call to your paper and said, hey, great storyline for you, that he screwed up, he or she. I think it was a father, okay? He screwed up. I feel bad for him because now all this stuff is happening because something that he tried to do that he thought was good and he was proud of his kid and all that.
Right.
Thought it was a good story. I feel bad for them first and foremost. Should there be some kind of penalty? I would hope that, like you said, they kind of use this as a warning. Here's your last chance warning. If we hear anything of this, we're cracking down, and we're cracking down hard. This is an example that I think they can use. You've heard the term teachable moment? This is a teachable moment. This should prevent anybody, the next person that does something like that foolish, then, hey, you know what? Fool me once, joke's on me, fool me twice, whatever the saying is. This isn't going to happen again because of what has come to light because of that. I know we got to get to a break, but I think I just think it's a little bit harsh if they do the worst case scenario what Pat Corbin said they were, and I hope that doesn't come to that. I hope that they can use this as a teachable moment, and then we don't have these issues anymore.
See, real quick, my fear would be that the only thing that would be learned if there isn't a penalty is that people would learn to, zip their lips. And not necessarily that the transferring, the back and forth.
It's going to happen, though, Mark. Don't be naive. It's going to happen.
Whoa, I'm not being naive, Pete. I think that if a team or a program took a hit, that I believe that would deter people from even making the attempt. I think if you're only going to say slap on the wrist this time, the only thing people are going to learn is to shut up when they're doing it.
Well, then we'll see what happens, and let's hope we find out soon. We got to take a break, come back, wrap up the show. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR, AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR, AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Show goes really fast on a week-to-week basis. You burn through 2 hours in like 2 minutes. It seems that way anyway.
Yep.
And today, no different than that. I'm looking forward to the game. Central at Memorial, kicking off at noon. The other two highlight games for me today, Bedford, Bishop Girton tonight. We're going to find out, if I should be moving BG up a little bit further and you in our power poll ballots. That is a very exciting football game to me. And then you got Plymouth-Wyndham today.
Yep.
You see BG winning or losing. You got Bedford winning that game, as I do. We both, I think, have Plymouth winning that game over Wyndham. I think Central Memorial, I know how you feel about Central. I feel, pretty much the same way. I see them winning that game against Memorial, but you just never know in these city games.
Yeah, toss-up games in a sense. All the three games you mentioned, I picked close games. I think a 6-point win for Central, a touchdown win for Plymouth, and a field goal win for Bedford. So at the very least, we ought to have some entertaining games for Week 5.
What about the 1 o'clock game in Portsmouth today? It was supposed to be last night. Goffstown, Portsmouth, rematch of a playoff game last year in Division III. Portsmouth beat them twice last year.
Yep.
And who knows? Is Connor Benjamin alone enough to defeat the Clippers?
I think he is. I'm trying to remember. I pick all the games for the paper, and I'm pretty sure I
happen to have it right here,
good.
Mark.
Thank you.
No,
I
this
don't
is
have it in
today's
front of me.
paper.
Oh, okay. So it was in yesterday's.
I think you picked Goffstown.
I did. For two reasons. One, certainly Connor Benjamin has just been a truck this season, and they put a real good scare into Memorial when they played in that Week 1 game. I know Portsmouth has a win over Division I Londonderry, but I just think that Connor Benjamin is going to be tough to stop. So we'll find out because Portsmouth has a couple of very good linemen. One of them, Rick Holt, right? He's
Ricky Holt, yeah.
He's the big name. He's one of them anyway. So we'll see. That ought to be a good matchup. We'll see how things play out.
I just ripped through my briefcase because I thought I had it, and I do have it.
Oh, good.
And let's see if I can get it before we run out of time.
Yeah, what did I pick?
Let's see if we get it before I run out of time. Oh, my God. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Goffstown 34-21.
There you go.
You have them big. That's all the time we have. Mark Hebert's Money Sense is coming up next. We'll be back next Saturday.